Thank you, Mark. So we heard there that some of the criticisms levelled initially don't seem to apply, that borrowing is actually the cause of sort of non-Thatcherite labour spending splurge. Stefan.
Well, thank you very much, Harry, and good evening, everyone. I was taking a photo of you earlier because I will tweet later this picture that confirms what everyone says about apathy and people's lack of interest in politics and unwillingness to come and attend debates. It's really great to see so many of you here. Now, Mark was certainly right about one thing. In fact, it occurs to me that we are not quite conducting this debate in the spirit Mrs Thatcher would perhaps have wished. We're being a little bit consensual. And Mark tells us that not everything that Thatcherism did was marvellous, and I'm going to tell you that not everything it did was terrible. I think she preferred a big row rather than this mushy agreement. And Mark was certainly right about something else, because I was young in the 1970s, and my parents had a crappy car, and I got a crappy car. Not everything has changed. Now, there's quite an interesting generational divide on Thatcher. In the 1980s was a pretty raucous, angry time, as those of you who were around will remember, and if you watch the clips of Prime Minister's Questions, or the audio clips of Prime Minister's Questions from the 80s, it was 15 minutes twice a week, and it was pretty horrible and noisy. And divided people. I was quite an angry young man in those days. There was something, we were living in what we then called Thatcher's Britain, and you had to say it like that. You had to say Thatcher's Britain like that, like all the comedians did, and that was what we were going through. It was tough. In 1980, October 1980, at the Conservative Party conference in Brighton, so over 33 years ago, Mrs Thatcher made perhaps her most famous speech or intervention when she said the media were expecting her to perform that famous manoeuvre, the U-turn, and she said, U-turn if you want to, the ladies not for turning. You can see that it's not true that Mrs Thatcher had no sense of humour. She had almost no sense of humour. She realised that there was fun involved in that. Now that, Harry mentioned when I was writing about management and leadership, that speech has established what since university I can call a paradigm on leadership, which says that you must plough on, and to change your mind is weak, and it's feeble and indecisive. You turn if you want to. It's the ultimate political insult. In the States they call it flip-flopping, as you know. I think that speech, and here's my biggest critique of Thatcherism, why I feel we need to move on from it. That idea of leadership, I think, is terribly damaging. In the real world, things change, facts change, circumstances change. The quote attributed to Maynard Keynes, of course, when facts change, I change my mind. No one's actually ever found that quote in writing, but it's attributed all the same. And all these, Blair too, and Tony Blair, in some ways, a continuation of Thatcherism by other means, try to live up to that. And so does David Cameron today. And John Major suffered by comparison, partly because he was seen as someone who was perhaps prepared to change his mind, an impossible party management issues to deal with, but was a shadow of this tough leader. You turn if you want to. It's a tribute to her, it's a tribute to Thatcherism, that idea is still so dominant in our political, our public discourse, but as I say, horribly damaging. Full speed ahead for the rocks. It's not a very sensible way to steer a ship or an economy or a country. Thatcherism damages in other ways, and we need to move on from it. Our attitude to Europe. It was that famous utterance, again on YouTube no doubt, of no, that drove Geoffrey Howe into resigning, into making that amazing speech, one of the greatest parliamentary speeches of the post-war era. I led to my President Challenger and walked her down, and that was piquant, you could say. This idea, she said, that all our troubles come from Europe, and that the English-speaking peoples must always come to the rescue, that it was 1 against, in those days, whatever it was, 1 against 9, 1 against 12, 1 against 50, or at the Commonwealth meetings, of course, in South Africa, 1 against 49. This rejoicing in isolation, rejoicing in stubbornness, rejoicing in not U-turning, again, very harmful. No politician, it's a tribute again to her stature, that no politician who has followed her has been able to challenge or shift this paradigm or undermine it in any way. And This is what Ed Miliband is partly struggling with today, that he does not strike a sufficiently Thatcherite pose as far as members of the media and others are concerned. But on Europe, I think we've learned, I think David Cameron has learned from his attendance at meetings and so on, that actually you do have to be inside. She proved it at Fontainebleau, way back in 81, was it, Mrs Thatcher, that if you stay in the room and negotiate, you can get a deal. That was one of her great successes, the rebate. Mark picked on spending restraint, deregulation, privatisation, the property owning democracy. As Lydia pointed out, all those pillars are highly problematic for the reasons that she set out. And let me just add to them. Of course, on spending restraint, as was always called, the payment for the costs of failure were extremely high under the Thatcher government, and without North Sea oil revenues, which unfortunately went in such large quantities towards the cost of failures, the benefits and so on, we would have been in a terrible state. We did not set up a sovereign wealth fund like the Norwegians did. We spent it on the cost of failure. Deregulation, privatisation. I travelled up here on a very punctual state-owned East Coast train. Now, privatisation of the railways happened under Mrs Thatcher's successor, but I don't think anyone seriously can regard that as a success. King's Cross is very handsome today, where I left earlier, again, under Network Rail's ownership and management, not Railtrack. Remember Railtrack? Calamitous moment in our history. And the idea that private is better necessarily than public, again, a very damaging Thatcherite ethos. Some of these quotes are apocryphal, some of them can't be traced down. It is said she walked around British Rail management at Euston there and said, if any of you were any good, you'd be in the private sector. It is said that she declared that any man or woman on a bus after the age of 30 must consider himself or herself a failure. This sort of notion that the public space, the public realm was bad, the private was necessarily better, again, it's a dominant idea. I don't want to be ad feminem about this. She was a remarkable historical figure, one of the few truly significant prime ministers of the 20th century. But someone whose legacy, I fear, is damaging. And more of the same, which is effectively what the current government are talking about, more of the same, harder, more inequality, this low wage, low productivity economy that Lydia was talking about. That too, I agree, I think it is her legacy. I think it's an unfortunate one. I think the future that is facing most of you in world work is, I'm afraid, not an attractive one. It's not one I'm very optimistic about for my children. And we need something better. We need better quality work. We need a more valued public sector, public realm, and such a thing as a society. Thank you very much.